Have you ever found yourself in a situation where doing the right thing seemed like the hardest choice? When honesty, instead of being rewarded, brought negative consequences. In today's video, we're going to explore this dilemma that many of us face: how to stick to our values and principles, even when the consequences seem worse than expected. If you've ever questioned whether it's worth maintaining your integrity during challenging times, this video is for you. Let's discover together how to handle these ethical dilemmas and why, in the end, goodness always prevails. Michael, a 35-year-old man, has been working for years as a propane tank delivery driver. He leads a modest life, driving through the city streets in his van, carrying heavy propane tanks to support his family. Every day he encounters different stories and challenges, but one thing never changes: his desire to help others. One afternoon, Michael receives a call from a customer. When he arrives, he finds an elderly man who, with difficulty, is trying to count the money to pay for the propane tank. When he realizes that part of the money is missing, the elderly man, visibly upset, begins to apologize, explaining that he didn't anticipate the shortage of funds. Moved by a deep sense of compassion, Michael makes a decision that would change the course of his life. Without thinking twice, he decides to pay the missing amount out of his own pocket. The elderly man, emotional, thanks him with tears in his eyes and wishes him that goodness returns to him tenfold. Michael, in turn, smiles back and continues his work, without imagining that hours later, his life would take an unexpected turn. After leaving the elderly man's house, Michael continued his day of deliveries. The act of paying the difference for the propane tank out of his own pocket brought him a sense of relief, but at the same time he felt a pang of worry. The money he used was meant to cover his expenses for the week, and he knew that this could complicate his financial situation. However, the grateful smile from the elderly man seemed to have made the sacrifice worth it. Michael drove through the streets of the city, delivering propane tanks to regular customers. Each delivery gave him another chance to reflect on what he had done. He wondered if he should have been more cautious, but deep down he knew he couldn't have left the elderly man without the propane. The man depended on it to cook, and Michael, by principle, would never ignore someone in need. At the end of the day, Michael returned to the distribution center to hand in the money from the day's sales. The atmosphere among his colleagues was as usual: laughter, conversations about football, and the challenges of being a delivery driver. He tried to stay optimistic, believing that, somehow, the sacrifice he had made wouldn't have serious consequences. After all, good deeds always come back positively, right? However, as he approached Mr. Thompson's office, the owner of the distribution center, Michael felt a sense of unease. He handed over the money collected that day and was immediately called in for a conversation. The serious tone in Thompson's voice already indicated that something was wrong. "Michael, I need to talk to you." "Please sit down," said Mr. Thompson without breaking eye contact. Michael, unsure of what to expect, sat down and waited for the words that would soon completely change the course of his life. Sitting across from Mr. Thompson, Michael felt his stomach churn. The owner of the propane distribution center wasn't known for being a compassionate man, but Michael still hoped he could explain his decision. "Michael, I heard that you paid out of your own pocket for a propane delivery to a customer today. Is that true?" Thompson's tone was cold and direct. Michael took a deep breath and explained what had happened. He told about the elderly man who didn't have the full amount and how he couldn't bear to leave him without the propane, especially knowing it was a basic necessity. He tried to appeal to Thompson's humanity, hoping he could understand that sometimes helping someone in need was more important than following rigid rules. However, Thompson's face remained expressionless. After a long silence, he responded, "I understand that you acted with good intentions, but the rules are clear. If a customer can't pay, we can't cover the loss. And you, as a delivery driver, are responsible for ensuring the company doesn't take a hit." Michael tried to argue, saying the amount was small and that he could make up for it with future deliveries. However, Thompson wasn't willing to negotiate. "Michael, this kind of attitude, as noble as it may seem, doesn't align with our company's rules. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to let you go. We can't risk more losses." Those words hit Michael like a ton of bricks. He was paralyzed for a few seconds, unable to believe what he had just heard. Thompson didn't budge an inch, and the decision seemed final. "Please gather your things. Your final payment will be processed by the end of the week," Thompson concluded, with a definitive tone. Michael left the office without saying a word. The journey home was the longest he had ever taken. The feeling of defeat and injustice weighed heavily on his chest. All he had wanted was to help, but the world didn't seem to reward good deeds. Now he was without a job and facing a huge uncertainty about the future. Michael walked slowly through the streets toward his home. The weight of losing his job was crushing him. Each step felt harder than the last, and his mind was filled with confused thoughts. How would he explain to Sarah, his wife, that he had lost his job? The bills were already tight, and now, without his income, everything seemed to be falling apart. When he reached his small house, Sarah was waiting at the door with a smile. She knew he was overwhelmed with work, but she never imagined the news he was bringing. Seeing her, Michael felt a wave of guilt and sadness. He had failed her and his family. "How was your day, honey?" Sarah asked, still unaware of Michael's distress. He tried to force a smile but couldn't hide the pain on his face. "Sarah, I got fired." Sarah's smile faded, and she was silent for a moment, trying to process what he had just said. "Fired? What happened?" Michael carefully told her the story, not leaving out any details. He explained what he had done for the elderly man and how it led to his dismissal. As he spoke, Sarah's eyes filled with concern, but she didn't interrupt, listening to every word attentively. When he finished, Sarah stepped closer, placing her hands on his shoulders. "You did what you believed was right. It doesn't matter what they think, Michael. You helped someone who needed it. We will get through this together. We always do." Even so, Michael felt the weight of responsibility. He knew Sarah was being strong for him, but the reality was harsh. With the end of his job, the bills would become too heavy a burden. He could already imagine the difficulties they would face in the coming weeks. "I just wanted to do the right thing, Sarah, but now I'm scared of what's going to happen. What if we don't find a solution quickly? How will we pay the bills?" Sarah hugged him. "We'll find a solution. God always has a plan, even if we can't see it now. Everything you did was out of compassion, and the universe won't ignore that." As Michael tried to calm himself in his wife's arms, a new uncertainty formed in his mind. What would he do the next day? Where would he go? And in that moment of darkness, he couldn't imagine that something unexpected was about to happen. The next morning, Michael woke up early, but there was no reason to hurry. The day felt empty and without purpose. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in hand, thinking about how to find a new job and pay the bills. Sarah, always optimistic, tried to distract him with light conversations, but the worry hung in the air. Suddenly, the sound of knocking on the door broke the silence in the house. Michael, not expecting visitors, looked at Sarah, who just shrugged, equally surprised. He got up and went to answer, thinking it might be a neighbor or someone looking for propane tanks. When he opened the door, Michael was completely surprised. Standing there was the elderly man he had helped the day before. The man, now with a firmer posture and a more relaxed demeanor, observed him with a look of deep gratitude. "You must remember me," said the elderly man with a slight smile. "Yesterday you helped me when I didn't have enough to pay for the propane." "Of course I remember," Michael replied, still confused. "How are you? Everything all right?" "I'm fine, thanks to you. But I didn't come here just to say thank you," said the elderly man with a more serious expression now. "I need to tell you something about myself that you don't know." Michael frowned, intrigued. The elderly man invited him to sit in the living room and began to tell his story. His name was Mr. Emilio, and contrary to what it seemed, he was not just a retired man with no resources. In fact, Emilio was a retired businessman who had built a successful life, but in recent years he dedicated his time to observing people's behavior. He always believed that the true nature of people only reveals itself in moments of difficulty, when there is no obvious benefit to being kind. That day when he met Michael, he was testing the goodness of the world as he did from time to time. His disheveled appearance and the situation of lacking money were part of a disguise to see who would truly help him without expecting anything in return. And Michael, with his sincere gesture, had proven that genuine kindness still existed in the world. "I was very moved by what you did," Emilio said. "You had no obligation to help me, but you did it out of the goodness of your heart. And I believe people like you deserve something in return." Michael listened to the story, hardly able to believe it. All he had done was pay for the propane for an elderly man who seemed to need help. But now, that same man was sitting in his living room, revealing himself to be a wealthy businessman and offering something Michael would never have expected. "I can't change what happened with your job," Emilio continued, "but I can offer you something much better. I want to help you just like you helped me. Let's change your life, Michael." Michael could hardly believe what he was hearing. Confusion and shock were written all over his face as Mr. Emilio continued to speak, revealing that he owned several businesses and even in retirement, still maintained connections with important enterprises. "You, Michael, have shown a rare quality in today's world. Your attitude deeply moved me. I want to offer you a job opportunity at one of my companies. It's a stable position with a good salary and benefits you would never find in the propane delivery job," Emilio explained with a serious but friendly expression. For a moment, Michael was speechless. He could barely process the fact that the simple decision to help someone the day before had led to this turn of events in his life. Sarah, who was listening to the conversation from the next room, was equally stunned, but her eyes sparkled with hope. I don't even know what to say," Michael finally responded. "All I wanted was to help someone who was in a tough spot. I never imagined something like this could happen." Emilio smiled. "That's exactly why I'm here. Life has mysterious ways of returning what we give to the world. Sometimes, when we least expect it, the reward for an act of kindness finds us. And believe me, you deserve this." Michael still hesitated, wondering if he should really accept such a generous offer from someone who, until yesterday, was just a stranger to him. He looked at Sarah, who nodded with a gentle smile, encouraging him to move forward. Michael knew this was a unique opportunity, something that could change his family's future for the better. "I accept," Michael said finally with a sigh of relief. "I accept this opportunity and I'm grateful from the bottom of my heart." Emilio stood up and extended his hand to Michael, who shook it firmly, feeling that a new chapter in his life was about to begin. The businessman, satisfied with the decision, made it clear that the details of the new job would be arranged in the coming days, but that Michael could count on him for anything he needed. Before leaving, Emilio made sure to thank him once more, saying, "You showed that kindness is priceless, Michael. And now, I want you to see how much the world still needs people like you." Michael remained silent for a moment, absorbing those words. He knew that life had given him a second chance, and now it was up to him to make the best of this new opportunity. The days following Emilio's visit were a mix of relief and anxiety for Michael. He was about to start a job that was entirely different from anything he had known, in an environment he had never dreamed of being part of. Still, he felt a deep gratitude for this new opportunity that seemed to have come out of nowhere. On the morning of his first day at work, Michael dressed in simple but clean and well-kept clothes as he always did. When he arrived at the address Emilio had given him, he was warmly welcomed by the company's staff. Everyone seemed to know who he was and what he had done, as if Michael's act of generosity had spread throughout the company. He was introduced to a new world of possibilities. Emilio, true to his word, gave him a position in an administrative area, where he could grow and learn over time. The change in pace and responsibilities was immense, but Michael was determined to make the most of it. As the weeks went by, Michael began to adapt to the new job. He and Sarah were finally able to breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that the bills would be paid and the future looked promising. More than the salary, Michael felt immense satisfaction knowing that his kindness had been recognized in such an unexpected way. One evening, while having dinner with Sarah, Michael reflected on everything that had happened. "I never imagined that helping someone like that could change my life so much," he said with a light smile. "I just followed my heart. And somehow, the universe returned it to me tenfold." Sarah smiled back, her eyes glowing with pride. "You've always been like this, Michael. You always did the right thing even if it meant a sacrifice. I think what happened is just proof that kindness comes back to us, sometimes in ways we can't even imagine." As they talked, Michael couldn't help but think about how much his life had changed in such a short time. The simple act of paying for a propane tank for an elderly man had turned into an opportunity he would have never expected. He remembered Emilio's words and how kindness still existed in the world, waiting to be rewarded. With a lighter heart and a clearer future, Michael allowed himself to believe that the good we do truly comes back to us, maybe not at the time we expect but always at the right moment. Thank you for following us this far. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories.